Kelechi and Chidi had been married for a year now, and on the surface, their marriage seemed like a dream. Their union was the kind that people admired from afar, an enviable blend of love, stability, and shared goals. Friends often remarked on how well they complemented each other, with Kelechi's beauty and Chidi's steady presence creating a picture-perfect couple. Kelechi was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. Her beauty was understated but undeniable, with soft curves that gave her a graceful silhouette. But it wasn't just her appearance that made her stand out, there was an air of mystery about her, a calm reserve that kept her somewhat apart from the world around her. She wasn't one to indulge in idle chatter or social gatherings, preferring the comfort of her own company or the quiet reassurance of a single close friend. It wasn't that she was antisocial, she just valued her peace, something that had been a part of her upbringing as the cherished only daughter of a wealthy family. Her father had doted on her, seeing in Kelechi a reflection of his own ambitions and dreams. When she married Chidi, it was as if the final chapter of a carefully written story had been completed. The wedding was nothing short of grand, lavish decorations, a guest list that read like a who's who of the community, and a celebration that lingered in the minds of the attendees long after the day had passed. The marriage was seen as a perfect match, Kelechi, the beautiful daughter of a prosperous family, and Chidi, the self-made man who had pulled himself from the depths of poverty to a position of respect. Chidi's journey had been anything but easy. As the firstborn in a family that struggled to make ends meet, he had taken on responsibilities that weighed heavily on his young shoulders. Dropping out of school wasn't a choice he had made lightly, but a necessity. His parents, though loving, simply didn't have the means to support the education of 3 children. His sacrifice allowed his younger brothers to continue their studies, and he threw himself into work with a determination that knew no bounds. He took on any job he could find, often working long hours for meager pay. But each job was a stepping stone, a way to climb out of the abyss of poverty. Years later, his hard work bore fruit. He returned home a successful man, one who had not only lifted himself but had also laid the foundation for a better life for his family. It was this strength and resilience that had drawn Kelechi to him. They had courted for a time, their relationship built on mutual respect and deep affection. When Chidi asked for her hand in marriage, it was as if all the hardship he had faced had been validated by this moment of happiness. The early days of their marriage were filled with hope and contentment. Chidi was a loving husband, always making sure that Kelechi had everything she needed. He worked tirelessly, running his business with the same determination that had pulled him out of poverty. For Kelechi, this was the life she had always wanted, a stable, loving marriage with a man she could respect and rely on. Yet, Chidi, for all his virtues, was not the lover she had imagined he would be. Their intimate moments were brief and lacked the depth of connection she had always dreamed of. He was what people called a one-minute man. She had waited and preserved her virginity for the passion she believed would come with marriage, but it never did. At first, Kelechi tried to ignore the disappointment. She reminded herself of all the good things in her life, the love, the stability, the respect. But as time went on, the void only grew larger. She spoke to Chidi about it, hoping that he would understand her needs, but his response was always the same, a dismissive remark that left her feeling more alone than before. "It's not food, Kelechi," he would say with a slight frown, his voice tinged with impatience. "There are more important things to worry about." For Chidi, sex was a simple act, something to be done and moved past. He didn't see it as the deep bonding experience that Kelechi longed for. And so, night after night, she lay in their bed, her thoughts swirling with unfulfilled desires and a growing fear that this was all their marriage would ever be. Despite her dissatisfaction, Kelechi tried to focus on the positives. She loved Chidi, she really did. He was a good man, a provider, someone who had overcome so much to build a life for them. But the dreams she had once nurtured, the dreams of passionate, all-consuming love, began to feel like distant fantasies, slipping slowly through her fingers. And yet, she kept them to herself, hiding the depth of her longing, the sense of incompleteness that haunted her soul. After all, what could she say? That she was unhappy with a man who had given her everything. That she wanted more from him than he was capable of giving. The night that changed everything. The evening had started like any other. The day's routine had unfolded without incident, and now, as the dusk settled over the city, Kelechi and Chidi were winding down for the night. Dinner was simple and uneventful. The conversation was sparse, Chidi was preoccupied with work, and Kelechi's thoughts were elsewhere. After cleaning up, they retired to the living room. Chitty flicked on the television while Kelechi absent-mindedly flipped through a magazine. But beneath the surface of their calm routine, something felt off. Kelechi couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her, a feeling she couldn't quite put into words. It was a heaviness in the air, an unspoken tension that made the silence between them feel almost oppressive. As the evening wore on, they decided to call it a night. Chitty went ahead to the bedroom while Kelechi lingered in the living room, lost in her thoughts. It was only when she heard the distant sound of a car pulling up outside that she finally got up to join her husband. Just as she was about to turn off the light, a loud crash shattered the stillness of the night. Her heart leaped into her throat. She froze, straining to listen, her mind racing. Had she imagined it? But then, she heard it again, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching fast. "Chitty," she whispered urgently, rushing to the bedroom. "Chitty, something is wrong." Half asleep, Chitty grudgingly sat up, confusion written on his face. "What is it?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Before Kelechi could answer, the door to their bedroom burst open, and 3 masked men stormed in, guns drawn. Kelechi's scream caught in her throat as one of the men pointed a gun directly at Chitty, who immediately raised his hands in surrender. "Don't move," the man growled, his voice cold and threatening. Kelechi felt her legs buckle beneath her as fear washed over her in waves. She clutched the edge of the bed, her mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not to them.
One of the robber attention drawn closer to Kelechi, and how beautiful and sexy she looks on the bed, and he approached her, pointing the gun at her and commanding her to bend down while he raped her. Immediately he said that Chitty was trying to fight the robber about to rape his wife, while other robbers are holding him and closing his mouth. After the first robber had finished having sex with her, the other robber went for his own turn. The pleasure Kelechi had have been what she have ever wanted, and she enjoyed the sex with the robbers. During the sex, she was grabbing the robber to fuck her so hard, her husband in shock watching all that happening. For Kelechi, this is not a 1-minute man, just like Chitty. This was the best sex she have ever had, and she wished she could have it again. The robbers took some money in the wardrobe and left that night, achieving everything they have gotten.
Kelechi sat in the dimly lit bedroom, staring at the wall, her hands unconsciously resting on her stomach. The past few weeks had been a blur of pain, confusion, and suffocating silence. Chitty barely spoke to her, and when he did, it was mechanical, words exchanged out of necessity rather than love. The weight of the pregnancy pressed down on her, making her feel like a stranger in her own body. She didn't know what to do. Every option felt like a betrayal. Keeping the baby would mean living with a constant reminder of that horrific night, but terminating the pregnancy felt like an irreversible decision she wasn't sure she could bear. Worse still, the unspoken judgment from those around her only added to the torment. She could see it in their eyes, hear it in their hushed whispers, some pitying her, others questioning her. One evening, as she sat in the living room staring blankly at the television, Chitty walked in. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, before sitting down across from her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Kelechi swallowed hard, bracing herself. "About what?" Chitty sighed, rubbing his hands over his face. "About the baby, about us." She felt her heartbeat quicken. "What about us?" "I don't know how to do this, Kelechi," he admitted. "Every time I look at you, I see that night. I hear," he trailed off, his face twisting with something between pain and anger. "I hear how you sounded. And I don't know if I can ever move past it." Kelechi flinched, shame and fury rising in her chest. "You think I wanted that?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "You think I asked for any of it?" "That's not what I'm saying," Chitty snapped, but his tone softened almost immediately. He exhaled sharply, looking away. I don't know how to love you the way I used to. And this baby. I don't know if I can be a father to it." Tears welled in Kelechi's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So what are you saying, Chitty? That you're leaving?" His silence stretched between them, thick and unbearable. She let out a bitter laugh. "Wow. The man who fought so hard to marry me, who promised me stability, respect, and love, is ready to run because things got difficult." Chitty's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." "No, it is," she shot back, standing up. You can't even look at me without seeing my worst nightmare, and I can't look at you without remembering how you did nothing to stop it. We're both drowning, Chitty. And you're too much of a coward to swim." Her words hit him like a slap, but she didn't care. She turned and walked out of the room, her hands clenched into fists. For the first time since that night, she felt something other than fear or grief. She felt anger. And maybe, just maybe, that anger would save her. In the days that followed, Kelechi made a decision. She couldn't keep waiting for Chitty to decide what he wanted. She had to take control of her own life. She reached out to a therapist, someone who specialized in trauma, and started attending sessions in secret. Slowly, she began unpacking the pain, the shame, the confusion. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was taking a step toward healing. One afternoon, while she sat in her therapist's office, a question was posed to her. "What do you want, Kelechi?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do you want? Not your family. Not Chitty. Not society. You." She hesitated. She had spent so much time thinking about what everyone else expected of her, she had never stopped to consider herself. Did she want to keep the baby? Did she want to fight for her marriage? Did she even love Chitty anymore? She left the session with more questions than answers, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was searching for them for herself. That night, as she lay in bed, she placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the faintest flutter of life inside her. Maybe the answers wouldn't come easily. Maybe healing would take time. But one thing was certain, Kelechi would not let herself be defined by what had happened to her. She would find her own way. Even if she had to walk it alone. Weeks passed, and Kelechi found herself changing. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed her. Therapy helped, and so did distance. She and Chitty barely spoke anymore, their marriage reduced to a hollow shell. One evening, after a particularly difficult session, Kelechi returned home to find Chitty waiting. He looked exhausted, guilt carved into his face. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, his voice strained. "I failed you, Kelechi. And I know I can't fix what happened, but I want to try." She studied him for a long moment. "You're right," she said softly. "You did fail me." Chitty flinched. Kelechi took a deep breath. "But I'm done waiting for you to fix things. I've made my choice." His eyes flickered with hope. "What choice?" "I'm leaving, Chitty." The words hung between them, final and unwavering. Chitty shook his head. "We can work through this." "No, I can," she interrupted. "But not here. Not with you." She had already packed a small bag, had already made arrangements to stay with a close friend. The life inside her deserved more than a home filled with resentment and grief. Tears filled Chitty's eyes, but he didn't stop her. He knew she was right. As Kelechi stepped outside, a cool breeze wrapped around her. She took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in months. She wasn't sure what the future held. Raising a child alone terrified her. But she was no longer afraid of herself, of her strength, of her ability to heal. For the first time since that night, she felt truly free. And as she walked away, she knew she was stepping toward a new beginning, one that was entirely her own.